This is Paul Singh, the market speculator with bullsonwallstreet.com. And today we're going to talk about trading Apple. We got the big gap down today off of earnings, which is pretty much why I don't trade earnings. And I always talk about this where you could have the inside information, you could know what's going to happen going into earnings, and you still oftentimes can't predict how price is going to react. Apple had fantastic earnings, it had fantastic guidance. Everything you wanted to hear, we heard, and yet it became a sell the news event, and we get this quick gap down on pretty big volume here for Apple. That's point number one, is we don't trade earnings. Point number two, while we're talking about trading Apple today, remember there's a lot of other stocks to trade. You can see these lists to my right and these lists to my left. While everyone focuses on Apples and the Googles, there's other stocks you can make a lot of money on, and that's what we focus on when we're swing trading in Bulls on Wall Street. Every once in a while we do take positions in Apple or Google, but it's a lot of other stocks that are going to give you the bigger percentage gain. So why am I talking about Apple? Because when Apple is in the news like this, sometimes we get some good opportunities and we can get a good quick swing off it. And that's what we're going to attempt to do here. So the first thing we're going to do is assess any patterns we see and any key support levels before we even talk about setups. So basically we're going to look at about 6 potential setups that could occur here that could trigger a trade in Apple. And these are both short and long setups. We're not predicting it right now. We're going to wait and see what happens. That's why we need to know the trend, the pattern, and the key support level. So if we pull this back here, we basically see since May, Apple has been in a nice uptrend. And that's why this became a sell the news event. We'd already made this big gain from 90 to 120. Longer term, we're essentially in this range-bound area here from the highs to our current lows here at about 90. So 90 to about 135. These are key levels for us to be aware of. Now, near term, what impacts our trading more is the 50-day moving average, some of these open gaps here, and these price action support and resistance levels. These are all key levels we need to be aware of, and we are. So these are the ranges we're watching. Now let's talk about the setups. Setup number one, and this is a potential setup. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but we will be ready if it does. That would be the gap down reversal. So what we're looking for here is sometimes these gap downs are overreactions or they're sell the news events, and the stock is still good. It's just going to take some time to reverse here. So what we're going to look for here is potentially a range to form in this, say 113 to 116 range. And if at some point we start to get into the gap range, that will trigger a long setup for us. And we can set a target here up around 118 and even play a break over that level. So that would be setup number one. It would be the gap down reversal. Number two is another reversal play. That would be the gap fill reversal. Let's say we don't get a good signal in here, but it does run up pretty quickly before we can take that trade. That doesn't mean the trade is over. We're next going to see how price reacts to this gap right here where we got the earnings breakdown from. If it reacts positively to that level, that's pretty much putting in a complete reversal for us. And we can enter here, say around 119. And if it does that, then these highs come into play that we've already outlined here as key support levels. Here at about 122, and then the all-time high at 135. So we're going to be watching that very closely. And what you could do also, if you take the gap reversal, you can always add if it clears this next level, and add again if it clears this next level. Number three is the recent high breakout. Now we're a little ways away from that, but in the coming months here, oftentimes Apple does squeeze to the upside going into the end of the year. We could get a break here of 122, and that would set up the recent high reversal. It's not quite that recent, but it is a major pivot point here going back to last November. So we'll be watching that level very closely. If it breaks that level, we have another long setup. Now, all of these long setups, the three that we've watched here, all relate to a show of strength. We're going to talk about one more long setup, and that's actually if it pulls back further. So what I would like to see is how Apple handles the 50-day moving average here. Now, this 50-day moving average also kind of corresponds here to this range up in here around 110. Now, the exact number here is 112. So this 110, 112 range. And what I would really like is a pullback here. And my favorite types of pullback plays are ones that actually violate the support level. So let's say it violates 112, tests the 110, then remounts that level and shows some strength there. That would be a trend pullback play. And you've heard me talk about this a lot lately. There have been a lot of nice trend pullbacks, especially in relative strength stocks. We talked about Brazil and a few other semiconductor trades we've taken. Apple is the next one here that is showing some relative strength. And now if it can pull back here and hold or violate and recapture this level, that would set up a nice trade. Of the four setups we talked about, this is the potential trade I'd be most excited about. So those are the four longs. Now there's two short setups I'm looking for. One, we talked about the 50-day. If it breaks down below this 50-day and holds that level, so oftentimes there's some back and forth when you break the 50-day. Rather than recapturing that level, if it holds that level to the downside, that would set up what I call a moving average sandwich, where we've got the next moving average and this range right here around 102, and we could see a pretty quick move from about 111 down to 102. So that's short setup number one. Short setup number two is the gap breakdown, the gap down breakdown. So it's essentially a continuation of this gap down. So we talked about the gap down reversal, where if it consolidates and then breaks into the gap, we would go long. This is the opposite of that. We want to see a consolidation here and then a break. It's a little tricky here because we have this intraday action too, but I generally use the close. So if we consolidate here, whatever that range forms, and let's say it breaks down below 114, that would set up a short play as well. We could take it down to about 112 and see if it breaks a 50-day and go for even a bigger win. So again, we don't know what's going to happen with Apple. I'm waiting for these patterns to emerge. Could be real quick. It could take a few weeks. But we're going to be adaptive to whatever happens here. We're not going in with any biases. We've got 6 specific actionable setups we can trade depending on what Apple is doing. And this is the way I like to trade. I don't go in thinking it has to do I'm going to go long Apple, or it has to be a short here because it gapped down. We want to be adaptive to what's going on with the stock. All right, so that's how I'm looking to trade Apple. I'll be back in later in the week. We're going to go over a few more of the trades we've taken in the trade report that's bullsonwallstreet.com. So I'll see you guys later in the week here.